The story of the United States. This is not just the story of a country. This is the story of an idea, a land that existed long before it had a name. A nation born from rebellion, shaped by struggle, tested by war, and challenged by time. From ancient civilizations to global superpower. From discovery and revolution to division and dominance, the United States has risen, fallen, and rebuilt itself again and again and again. It was loved by some, criticized by many, but never ignored. This is the story of how America was formed and why its influence still shapes the world today. Part 1. Before America was America. Long before the name America existed, this land was full of life. For more than 15,000 years, millions of Native Americans lived across North America. They were not primitive or scattered. They built organized societies, traded with each other, followed deep spiritual beliefs, and governed their people with clear rules and leadership. In the Northeast, the Iroquois Confederacy created one of the earliest democratic systems in history. In the center of the continent, the Mississippian people built massive earth mounds and thriving cities. In the Southwest, the Pueblo peoples constructed advanced stone villages. Across the Great Plains, powerful tribes followed the land, animals, and seasons with precision. This land was not empty. It was not waiting to be discovered. It was already home to entire civilizations. But soon, outsiders would arrive from across the ocean and history would change forever. Part 2. Discovery and Collision, 1492 to 1607. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic under the Spanish crown, believing he had reached Asia. He hadn't. What he actually triggered was one of the greatest and most devastating turning points in human history. European explorers, Spanish, French, English, and Dutch followed. They brought guns, steel, religion, ambition, and disease. Entire indigenous populations were wiped out by illnesses they had never encountered before. This was not just discovery. It was collision. Spain conquered much of Central and South America. England, slower and more calculated, looked north to lands that would become the United States. Part 3. The Colonies and the Seeds of Rebellion, 1607 to 1775. In 1607, the first permanent English settlement was founded at Jamestown, Virginia. Life was brutal. Starvation, disease, and conflict nearly destroyed the colony. But something important happened here. People began living far from kings. Over time, 13 British colonies formed along the Atlantic coast. They were diverse farmers, merchants, craftsmen, enslaved Africans, indentured servants, and religious refugees. They paid taxes to Britain. They followed British laws, but they had no real voice. Then Britain made a fatal mistake. After costly wars in Europe, Britain raised taxes on the colonies without representation. The cry spread like fire. No taxation without representation. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. Part 4. The American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. In 1775, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. Farmers stood against the most powerful empire on earth. In 1776, a group of rebels did something unthinkable. They signed a document that openly defied a king. The Declaration of Independence declared, "All men are created equal. Governments exist to serve the people. Tyranny must be resisted." This was radical, dangerous, revolutionary, against all odds, with help from France, grit, and belief. The colonies won. In 1783, Britain surrendered. A new nation was born. Part V. Building a republic, 1783 to 1800. Winning independence was the easy part. Running the country turned out to be way tougher than anyone expected. The Founding Fathers had to tackle a scary question. How do you create a strong government without giving one person too much power? That's when they wrote the U.S. Constitution, which created 1. Separation of powers. 2. Checks and balances. 3. A republic, not a monarchy. Then came the Bill of Rights, protecting freedom of speech, religion, the press, and the right to bear arms. It wasn't perfect. Slavery still existed. Women still had no right to vote. But something new had begun. a nation built on ideas and laws, not kings or family bloodlines. Part 6. Expansion, Ambition, and Contradiction, 1800 to 1860. America expanded rapidly. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the nation overnight. Pioneers crossed mountains. Railroads followed. Cities rose, but this expansion came at a terrible cost. Native Americans were pushed off their land, losing their homes and way of life. Entire tribes were forced to march to their deaths on the heartbreaking Trail of Tears. Slavery just took over as the land expanded, spreading like wildfire everywhere. The nation was growing but splitting in two. Part 7. The Civil War, America Against Itself from 1861, 1865. By the mid-1800s, the United States was growing fast, but it was tearing itself apart from the inside. The main issue was slavery. Southern states depended on enslaved labor for their economy. Northern states were moving toward industrial work and wanted slavery to end. Both sides believed their way of life was under threat. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860, several Southern states chose to leave the Union. They formed their own country, the Confederacy. War was now unavoidable. The Civil War was brutal and personal. Families were divided. Neighbors fought neighbors. Battles were fought in fields, towns, and forests across the country. At first, the war was about preserving the Union. But Lincoln slowly changed its purpose. He made it a fight for freedom, declaring that enslaved people in rebel states would be freed. The cost was enormous. More than 600,000 soldiers died, more than in any other American war. Cities burned. Farms were destroyed. The nation was traumatized. In 1865, the Union won. Slavery was officially abolished. America survived, but it would never be the same again. Next, Part 8. Rebuilding and the Rise of Industrial Power from 1865, 1914. After the Civil War, the United States entered a period of rebuilding and transformation. Former enslaved people were now free, but freedom did not mean equality. The South struggled economically, and new laws were created to limit the rights of Black Americans. At the same time, the country began changing at an incredible speed. Factories appeared everywhere. Railroads connected the coasts. Steel, oil, electricity, and machines reshaped daily life. Millions of immigrants arrived from Europe, Asia, and beyond. They came with nothing but for chasing opportunity. Cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit exploded in size. Big businesses rose. Some men became extremely wealthy. America became an industrial giant. But this growth had a dark side. People had to work long working hours. People worked in unsafe factories and child labor, also huge gaps between rich and poor. America was becoming powerful, but also unequal. Still, one thing was clear: the United States was no longer a young nation. It was becoming a global economic force. Part 9. World War, Depression, and Global Leadership from 1914, 1945. When World War I began in Europe, America stayed out at first. But eventually, it joined the fight, and its entry changed the outcome. After the war, the U.S. economy boomed. The country felt unstoppable. Then came disaster. In 1929, the stock market crashed. Banks collapsed. Businesses closed. Millions lost their jobs. This period became known as the Great Depression. People stood in bread lines. Families lost homes. Hope was scarce. President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded with bold action. His New Deal programs created jobs, rebuilt infrastructure, and restored confidence. Then came World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, America entered the war fully. Factories switched overnight to producing weapons, ships, and planes. Women entered the workforce in huge numbers. In 1945, the war ended, but not before the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Japan, changing warfare forever. When the war ended, much of the world lay in ruins. America did not. The United States emerged as the most powerful nation on Earth. Part 10. The Cold War and the American Century, 1945 to 1991. After World War II, a new conflict began not with bullets, but with ideas. The United States and the Soviet Union faced off in the Cold War. Capitalism versus communism, freedom versus control. There was no direct war between them, but tension was everywhere. The biggest worry was nuclear weapons. Also, spy networks. Proxy wars was constant fear. America built alliances like NATO, spread its influence through aid, trade, and culture, and invested heavily in science and defense. One defining moment came in 1969 when the U.S. landed humans on the moon. It was more than a scientific achievement, it was a statement of dominance. American music, movies, brands, and lifestyle spread across the world. This era became known as the American Century. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War ended. For the first time in modern history, the United States stood alone as the world's single superpower. Part 11. Terror, Technology, and Transformation 2001 to 2016. On September 11, 2001, the United States experienced one of the darkest days in its history. Commercial airplanes were hijacked and used as weapons. The Twin Towers collapsed. The Pentagon was struck. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in a single morning. The attack was broadcast live to the entire world. America was shocked, but stayed united. Flags filled the streets. Strangers helped strangers. The nation moved with anger, fear, and determination. For the first time in generations, Americans felt truly vulnerable. The government responded quickly. The U.S. launched a global war on terror, beginning with Afghanistan and later Iraq. These wars lasted far longer than expected, costing trillions of dollars and thousands of lives. Soldiers served multiple deployments. Families carried the weight at home. At the same time, security became a permanent part of daily life. Airports changed forever. Surveillance expanded. Privacy was reduced in the name of safety. But while war dominated headlines, another revolution was quietly reshaping the country. Technology exploded. The internet moved from desktops to pockets. Smartphones changed how people talked, worked, shopped, and thought. Social media platforms turned ordinary citizens into broadcasters and politicians into constant public figures. American tech companies reshaped the global economy. Innovation accelerated faster than laws could keep up. This era also brought contradictions. The U.S. became more connected, yet more divided. More powerful, yet more uncertain. More advanced, yet more anxious about the future. By 2016, America was still the world's most influential nation, but it was clearly changing. The old rules no longer fully applied, and the next chapter would be even more unpredictable. Part 12. Crisis, Conflict, and Continued Dominance 2016 to 2026. The late 2010s and early 2020s tested the United States like few periods before. Political tensions deepened. Protests filled the streets. The country argued loudly about identity, power, and the future. Then came COVID-19. The pandemic shut down cities, overwhelmed hospitals, and shook the global economy. Millions died worldwide. Yet the U.S. adapted. They did rapid vaccine development, kept boosting the economy, and technological acceleration continued. At the same time, competition with China increased. AI, semiconductors, energy, and military power became central to global strategy. By 2026, despite years of crisis, division, and nonstop criticism, the United States remained at the center of global power. It was still the world's largest economy, not just in size, but in influence. Decisions made in Washington affected markets in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. The U.S. dollar continued to dominate global trade, energy pricing, and international finance. Even countries that openly opposed America still relied on its currency and financial system. Militarily, no nation came close. Its aircraft carriers functioned as mobile bases, capable of projecting power anywhere on Earth. Its Air Force and Navy were larger and more technologically advanced than most countries' entire militaries. Its cyber and space capabilities shaped modern warfare in ways few fully understood. But America's true military strength was not just its weapons, It was its network. Through NATO, the United States stood at the center of the most powerful military alliance in history. An attack on one member was considered an attack on all. This meant that any country challenging the U.S. was not facing America alone. It was facing dozens of advanced nations acting together, with shared intelligence, coordinated forces, and unified command structures. No rival alliance came close to matching this level of integration, trust, and global reach. Beyond military power, the U.S. remained the heart of global technology and finance. American companies led in artificial intelligence, cloud computing, aerospace, defense technology, biotechnology, and semiconductors. Innovation flowed through Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and American universities, and then outward to the rest of the world. Culturally, the influence was just as strong. American movies, music, brands, platforms, and ideas continued to shape how billions of people thought, communicated, and lived. Even those who criticized the United States consumed its culture daily. This kind of influence cannot be enforced. It can only be accepted. Yes, America was challenged. Yes, it was criticized by rivals, allies, and even its own people. But it endured. Final part. Why no one can beat the United States? What makes the United States so difficult to defeat is not one advantage. It is the system. To truly beat the U.S., a rival would need to 1. Replace the global financial system. 2. Match military power across every domain. 3. Break alliance networks spanning continents. 4. Surpass technological innovation. 5. Compete with cultural influence. And do all of this at the same time. We must agree, no country can do it. Some nations may challenge America economically. Some may rival it militarily in one region. Some may advance rapidly in technology, but none dominate across every layer of power simultaneously. And most importantly, the United States has something rare in history. That is the ability to absorb crisis and reinvent itself. Empires collapse when they cannot adapt. America survives because it is constantly tested, argued over, criticized, and rebuilt. That is why, by 2026, the United States was not just powerful. It was structurally resilient. And that is why, for now, no country can truly beat it. History shows us that power is never just about weapons or wealth. It's about systems, alliances, ideas, and the ability to adapt. The United States has faced wars, crises, division, and doubt, yet it still stands at the center of the world. Not because it is perfect, but because it can change, rebuild, and lead again. Many nations may challenge America in one area, but no nation challenges it in all, and that is why, even today, the story of the United States is far from over.